Gold. Good holes and bad holes. Bad holes that were good holes and good holes that were bad holes. We're going to talk gold and we're going to talk holes. Copper looking good. Unwanted procedures in the U.S. Say it ain't so. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk the Breonna Taylor settlement. We'll talk the U.S. dollar. And of course, we'll get into the markets. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, Fight the Fed, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 87 of Bizarro World. Nick, first off, how are you?
It's a whole lot of holes, Gerardo. I'm doing well. How are you?
I am well. There are a whole lot of holes. You know what's funny about 2020? Funny, not funny. It's been such a crazy year that we may have discovered, what seems to be the potential for life on Venus. And that's not even what I led with on a podcast where we just basically talk shit about everything. That's the kind of year it's been, right? It's crazy. But anyhow, it was an interesting week. Last week you and I talked about the fact that we were expecting drill results from several companies, and several delivered some very, very good results, potentially game-changing results, some not so good, and some that were good, but the market, I don't think, understood that they were good. And so, the company sold off, and we'll get into all of that. But let's start with the gold space, right? The gold space, gold closed at $19.50 today. I think it's up $8 for the week. Silver was up 4 cents for the week. The dollar was down just a tad bit for the week. But copper was up a nickel or so from last week. And so copper gold plays to me are starting to really heat up. The market's starting to reflect that. What are you seeing in the gold space? Do you continue to believe this is a consolidation before the next leg up? Or do you think we break down to the low 1900s and high 1800s where, frankly, there's a lot of support and we could bounce in a slingshot type of fashion?
I'm here. I halted too long. Bad things happen when you halt too long, Gerardo.
We're going to start with New Placer Dome Gold. Let's do it.
No, I'll answer your question about gold. It's interesting because it's been consolidating, like you say. And so I've been writing about it, and I'm keenly watching the dollar, which has been doing the same. It's been sort of sideways action since August. And so if you're a market participant, if you watch these things like we do, you should be keenly interested in what's going on right now, because as I see it, we're looking for direction, which is what you asked me. And that's, of course, a crystal ball question. It seems to me from the charts that gold and silver want to go higher. It looks like the doctor, as you say, copper is leading the way, like nudging in that direction, right? A little bit, which copper does sometimes. But for me, the dollar has been a question mark, right? Because it gained a little bit of strength in September. Jerome Powell says we're going to keep rates at, 0 until 2023, which frankly wasn't enough for the market. It was a rough week for the NASDAQ and the S&P, and especially some of the big companies that have been propping up those indices for some time now, the FANG and tech stocks, of course. And so, Jerome keeps saying he has tools. Journalists are starting to ask about questions. I think we're going to have to see what these tools are going to be sooner than later. And of course, what are they? Negative rates and buying stocks. The first of which is exceedingly bullish for gold, and the second of which tells you how far down the rabbit hole this experiment has gone.
It's absolute madness. It's just absolute madness. I mean, we don't have capitalism, and I'm not going to get on a huge rant here because we've talked about it several times on this podcast, but we no longer have, practical traditional capitalism here in the United States. And, if Jerome's testimony this week, the Fed chair, wasn't enough to convince you of that, then, you just believe in your own set of facts, and that's okay. You're entitled to that. But if you're a saver, if you're not an owner of financial assets, if you don't know the way the game is being played, man, you're being played. And it's tough to see, because the bottom line, Nick, is that most people aren't fortunate the way that you and I are to be involved and active in a space that, frankly, is being for lack of a better word, given money. I mean, they're making it as easy as possible for us to make, a very, very good living that is likely turning into transformational wealth for a lot of people. And, on the other end of the spectrum, you have food banks that are at record highs as far as demand goes. And it's just talk about a tale of two cities or a tale of two countries or a tale of, two groups in society. The middle class is being gutted. The middle class is being gutted, and there's no other way to put that. And so, again, while we're out here distracted about red hats and all this other stuff, we have all sorts of nasty stuff going on. Let's talk about...
Yeah, it's driven, just real quick, it's driven inequality to record extremes, of course, but there's also some disillusionment. The president had a town hall this week, and he said that all Americans own stocks, right? And so I don't know if he really believes that, or that was like a slip, or that's a piece of propaganda or a lie or whatever. But certainly 100% of Americans don't own stocks. It's closer to half the country, right? And then if you drill down on it, I'm not going to make up the numbers, but a smaller and smaller fraction of people of that 50% own a larger and larger percent of the assets, right? And that's why you get this bifurcation of not only wealth, which creates the drastic inequality, but think of how divided everything else is as well, right? It's for me, it's an extension of that.
And we keep making things up. And let me give you an example, right? We know that the trillions of dollars that was magically just added zeros on a ledger somewhere on a computer screen went mostly to corporations, and the banks were large beneficiaries of that capital. It didn't go to the average everyday citizen. And we know that because small business in this country, again, is being gutted. And now we have things like, if you have great credit and you have equity in your home, because the housing market in a lot of areas it's absolutely on fire, right? So if you go to refinance your mortgage, everyday Joe the plumber type shows up at the bank. Well, starting December 1st, lenders now will be required to pay an adverse market fee to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for those loans, right? Effective December 1st. And who that's being passed down to. And they're not going to pass it down to you, the consumer, at cost. They're going to find a way to make a margin on a fee that's being imposed on them. And it's just, again, it's just so incredibly rigged right now. That I have days where I feel bad to be doing as well as I'm doing. I know that sounds, like I'm pandering, but I'm really extremely trying to be more focused on helping and contributing in whatever ways I can, not just to people that I'm close to, but, just in general, people you don't know, people that just need help, people that, the food banks that, there's record high demand because it feels so rigged. And again, I'm lucky enough to be one of the beneficiaries. If Trump wins, I know I get a tax cut. If Biden wins, I'll have a heads up and I'll sell a little bit of stock. But, I know the game keeps going. So both of those options, I'm going to be all right. Social issues aside, it's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, it's just a rigged economy. And, it's the ECB now is talking about, openly embracing negative interest rates because they have no room to go up. They can't raise rates. They'll blow up. There's no bid. They've killed their bond market. So what option do they have? And, this all leads to a restructuring. And we've talked about this before. This will lead to a restructuring of the monetary system as we know it. And that's coming. And we've had that conversation here before. And I know you want to talk Ray Dalio a little bit later on.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's a perfect, right? But there's a lot of things in there. Yeah, Ray Dalio is talking again about a restructuring, and he's talking about a lot of things that we can talk about in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the making things up, which you were talking about. I mean, literally just making things up. Unprecedented, right, Gerardo? I hate that word, but Trump was trying to get the government a cut of the TikTok deal, right? Like he brokered the deal so the government should get a cut, and then defended that position when asked about it, like it was a good idea. Like his response was framing it like this: like, can you believe no one has thought of this before? Like the government facilitated the deal. Why shouldn't we get a cut? And it's like, because government shouldn't be involved in business and you shouldn't be picking favorites in an independent capitalistic system. Like, where are we living right now, Gerardo? I don't understand. And then another story I saw this week was, and people like start scratching their heads like, oh, maybe it is a good idea. It's like, no, it's not a fucking good idea. Anyway, another one I saw this week was private equity paying themselves dividends on money-losing companies by taking out low-interest loans. So the companies, let's be clear, when you invest in like a dividend aristocrat, right, like a Sherwin-Williams or like a Hershey's chocolate that has paid consistently growing dividends for decades out of their profitable business, that's a key word there, Gerardo, profitable.
It's a good P word.
That's where like dividends come from. The business returns capital to its shareholders from the profits. Am I getting something wrong there? Did I forget this from like freshman year? Is that square so far?
That's square. I'm following.
So these motherfucking private equity guys, where Jerome Powell comes from, remember, right? Like this is their mindset. They have unprofitable companies, unicorns or whatever, and we know they're unprofitable. We don't have to rehash that whole thing. But now they're just taking loans to pay themselves dividends. So they're taking on debt. The Financial Times was gracious enough to call it leverage. They're taking on debt to pay themselves dividends. But they're not dividends because they're paid out of debt. It's like, and we say it every week, it's a fucking bizarro world.
I read an article today on CNBC. I'll put a link up, and it was a half decent article. But the headline, was by Michael Farr. The problem with the U.S. economy is there are too many poor people. And then under key points, it says, it's easy to hate the rich for all that they have and all that you don't. But the rich aren't the problem. Poor people are. And then he goes on to make his case. And again, he had some points. I get to where he was going, but it's just a bizarro world right now. Let's pivot back real quick to the gold space and talk the release. Let's start with New Placer Dome Gold. They halted their stock, and everybody assumed that meant they had a blockbuster hole. I said last week I was expecting results from them this week. And they delivered results, and they delivered good results. However, I think the halting of the stock for multiple days, which I did talk with the CEO Max Sally, and he did explain that was an exchange issue, not something that they requested. And so in fairness to them, they didn't request for the stock to be halted for 2 days. They thought they would do a quick halt and then resume and announce the fact that they drilled 38.1 meters of 1.08 grams per ton gold. It's oxidized. It's relatively near surface. It's an extension, a vertical extension of a hole that had intersected 122 meters of 1.2 grams per ton gold. And you and I know, Nick, the systems in Nevada with oxidized gold, man, if you have a half a gram a ton and it's relatively near surface, you're in the game. Yeah, you're in the game. So this was a really good hole. There was also a silver credit of 26.26 grams per ton silver. And again, to their credit, the company didn't even give you the gold equivalent or the silver equivalent. They didn't play that game. So I thought it was a really good hole that was not taken well. And the stock sold off some 20-something% this week, right? And so it was the very first hole. They hit exactly what they wanted to hit. There's a lot of assays pending there. And, and then they have Kinsley. 13 holes are at the lab now or headed there. And we should have results from Kinley and that Kinsley Mountain. And that is expected to be, a high grade play where you're either going to see some blockbuster results or it's not going to be the flagship for long, right? I expect that it's going to be an excellent set of results. It's a combination of infill drilling, extension drilling, and some wildcat exploration drilling. So we'll see how successful that program is. But, New Placer Dome Gold at these levels might be worth looking into. What were your thoughts? Do you think it sold off because of the halt?
I have a couple of thoughts. I thought the halt was theatrics from the very beginning. I told you as much as soon as it was halted right before I even knew what the hole was. I thought that was a bit theatrical. And then I make a comparison. A company I follow, Rupert Resources, put out 3 grams of gold over 171 meters, and then 1.5 grams a ton over 200.9 meters, and they didn't halt their stock and it gapped up, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, the halt is one thing, and then I think there's confusion, right?
Yep.
2 other things actually. One, I think, and I guess, no, I'm not going to apologize. I think the Bolo's a has-been project, right? And I know because I helped raise money to drill it before and it came up empty. I know, new reinterpretation, we're drilling below the thing. It's a decent hole. I get that. But the market knows about that project, and it was drilled recently, like within the past 12 months or something.
Correct.
Right? And so that's not like hot new girl at the bar, whereas Kinsley is. And so now my second part, I think a bit of confusion. I'm not sure.
Kinsley's a hot girl that went away for a few years, came back looking hotter maybe, right?
Exactly right. And so I don't know if the market thought these were the Kinsley results. You could probably make that argument because Nevada Sunrise sold down.
Dumb fucking market.
And so,
I bought some, by the way. I'm just letting y'all know. Whoever sold some Nevada Sunrise shares thinking that these results had anything to do with that, I added, and I already have a boatload, but I couldn't help myself.
And so those are my thoughts. I mean, it's a good hole at Bolo, but given all that context, I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think, look, rightfully so, the company has said that Kinsley Mountain is the flagship. I think they're starting to realize that unless they do some aggressive step outs and prove that this is indeed a project that should be looked at, through a different lens, that the market isn't going to reward even good holes. Good holes at this point are going to be bad holes. You're going to need a great hole to get a good reception from this project. That's my interpretation of the market action this week with New Placer Dome Gold. Let's talk Chakana Copper because they delivered well. And again, first 3 holes here, and the headline was 15.2 meters of 2.1% copper, but that didn't begin to tell the story. There's a lot of good in that release. Do you want to get into some of that, Nick?
Well, yeah, and you'll have more to say because you've talked to David, but a couple of things, right? They're drilling a target here, Paloma and Paloma East. We know that this mineralization starts at, I'll just hit the big point so then we can get into it. Starts at surface and then continues to depth. We know that these things are about 25 meters wide at surface and then continue to widen at depth, perhaps maybe even, and I like this term, coalescing, connecting together.
Coalescing holes.
That's exactly right. A whole lot of holes this week. So doubling to 50 meters wide at 150 meters depth. And then for me, the thing that really stuck out, and I'm just trying to find it so I get the number right 1 second, is they were drilling this one hole that they thought was going to end significantly shorter than where it did at like 175.
Yeah.
Such.
Yeah. They thought it would end about 175. They were like, should we terminate it? And they just kept waiting for it to run out.
And so when I saw this number, I was like, well, that's not 75 meters, right? The hole didn't exit the breccia until 627 meters deep. And so just think about 627 meters deep, like 2% copper was the number that came out of the headline hole. But it's only 3 of 5 holes. I believe the other holes are visually mineralized. And so there's dozens of these pipes on the property. It's in a mining district, and particularly exciting, in addition to the holes themselves, is the concept that this could potentially be open pittable, right? So there's a lot there to chew on, which I think the market has to all connect together.
No, I think you did a beautiful job there, Nick. That's exactly the implication here, is that now, there's the potential. We've always known about, the deeper potential there, but if this continues and they believe this does, they believe this absolutely has the potential to be open pittable. And again, that's a game changer. And I know in my conversations with David, Goldfields has to be happy about what could be a game changing discovery on this part of the property. It's also interesting to me now that, the breccia extends now beneath the two outcropping pipes. And now there's 150 meters of strike length horizontally. And so, you're getting the best of both worlds with this. You're getting a potentially open pittable, higher grade copper gold resource. And now you're looking at the potential, for a monster at depth. And so it's a fully funded 15,000 meter drill program that I think will turn out assays every couple of weeks. And I can't wait to see the numbers that the program delivers. I think it's going to be a fun September and October for the company.
It's going to be very exciting, and at some point they're going to have to add them all up, right? And we're going to get a little taste of an initial resource estimate, which I think is going to be exciting as well.
Exactly. I sent a note out to subscribers, and I sent it out earlier, and nobody hears this until Monday, so I don't feel bad for subscribers like I'm front running them and telling you this, but you'd be well advised to look at Chakana at these levels because it'll be trading in dollars instead of cents soon. That's my belief. So Chakana copper, we've been telling you this since it was a quarter, kind of like Magna. We've been telling you about Magna since it was in the 10-20 cent range. And yeah, you know what? Let's talk Magna real quick before we talk Millrock. Magna had some news that I think, again, the market just kind of looked at it and said, all right, you have a cute $80 million after-tax NPV using $1,450 gold at a 5%.
There's no CapEx.
They're right. And they completely missed the fact that there's no CapEx. They used $1,450 gold. And oh, by the way, this pre-feasibility study, this is the second one now that CEO Arturo Bonillas has completed since he acquired the asset a couple of months ago. And it really is just to be able to provide formal guidance because the regulators wouldn't allow it until they updated the mine plan. And so now there's the potential, or not the potential, they are mining underground. They have the heap leach, operation turning. They're producing. They have cash cost of $1,204 per ounce. Those are very conservative numbers that Arturo used, and I spoke with him earlier. And he said this publicly, so I'm not disclosing anything that's not in the public domain. But those numbers are all numbers that he feels he can optimize, and they are optimizing, and all the optimization will come from the mine itself, the production. And so, the dilution moving forward is going to be minimal. And there's a lot of other things at play here. Exploration on multiple projects. He expects to have the Mercedes project producing in Q1 of 2021 is the target now. And that's production just from a limited drill program that they did earlier in the year. He said, look, it's right at surface. It's oxidized. We're just going to go ahead and mine it and use that to fund exploration on the rest of the property, which is large. So Magna Gold, absolute bargain at these prices, in my opinion.
We got a video of the restart of operations, both above ground. There's some footage of the pads and of the pit, and then underground. We can put a link to that. And what stood out to me? Well, you mentioned the $1,450 per ounce gold price that they used. At $1,950, it's a $231 million NPV, which is currently bigger than the entire market cap, right?
And that's US, yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah. Either way, it's bigger. I mean, I think, yeah. Anyway, it's bigger, and so then you add in cost-cutting measures. The one thing I think, if I would ding it, but it gives them room to improve, which to me means potential upside is the cost. But they outlined in the release that they have full intentions to not only reduce costs but to extend the mine life by bringing in ore. And again, we're just talking about one project. So yeah, I thought that was a solid press release. Yeah,
and don't underestimate the M&A potential here. Arturo's made it clear from the very beginning. He understands the window that we have here in this gold cycle, and his Rolodex is lengthy. And so I expect him to vend in or go get other projects. And I think soon we'll start to see some of that, be developed. And I know they're drilling La Pima, the very attractive high-grade silver target that's seen, some excellent results in the past. So a lot going on there, whether you like exploration, gold, silver, production, heap leach, underground, M&A action. Like Magna literally gives you every single thing in the space that people tend to gravitate towards.
It's a heck of a story.
Heck of a story. Disappointing results. We still have yet to get the discovery hole that we are all hoping for from Millrock. Millrock, as you know, we mentioned before, had drilled a meter of 0.76 grams per ton gold. I know that the partner company, Resolution, had put out, and I saw this on Twitter. I didn't see a release on it, but they put out a hole and they put out the core to it, and they're fast tracking the hole. And you know, it's quartz veins, it's broad veining, it's all the good stuff that they've wanted to see. They've said they've seen nice rock before. This is supposed to be the best hole that they've seen visually. We'll know in a couple of weeks if that means anything. And again, this is exploration. We're, 6, 7, 8 holes in. It takes a bit sometimes. And I think that might be the case with Millrock, though. Again, one hole changes everything, right? If you can make a discovery.
That's it. I hadn't seen the tweets. I just pulled up the chart while you were talking about it. Somebody has and translated it to Millrock quickly because it's closed the gap from the disappointment when it put out the hole last week already. So, look, yeah, we talked briefly about this last week. It's a big program they got because Resolution has to spend a lot of money there this year. And so a lot of chances left. And now you got me wanting to see the results of this hole.
Well, and let me read you the description of the hole. Encouraging shallow dipping 7-meter thick quartz vein intersection from 488 meters in hole number 7 as part of a 22-meter thick zone of intense sulfides, alteration, and quartz veining from 476 meters. And I'm no geologist, but that is some pretty looking rock. And we'll go ahead and put a picture up and a link of that if anybody cares to take a peek at it. But yeah, the rock looks good. It doesn't mean anything till you get some numbers back, right?
Love me some intense alteration.
Love some intense alteration. Absolutely. Where do you want to go next, Nick?
Well, I mean, let's put a bookend on it with Dalio, right? Because we sort of started going down that road, talking about the shortcomings of capitalism. And he's been saying as much for a while and is back out pointing to a couple of things. One, the amount of debt that the government has taken on. Two, the way in which Wall Street allocates or misallocates resources, which is the inequality we were just talking about. And that's how it gets a bad rap. And then talking about, and I thought he was going to talk about generations when he talked about, a rising power, but he ended up talking about China. And ultimately he was talking about how this debt and how this inequality and how capitalism being painted as the boogeyman and the quasi embracement of socialism is bad for the U.S. because it's going to, if we don't do anything, right? And that's the same with the fourth turning. If it's all about if, how you handle it. Ray was saying, if we don't do something about this now, the dollar has the risk of being dethroned as the reserve currency, which is not a new idea, but I think in this 2020 moment is easier to grasp and contextualize. And he tied it together very nicely. And I thought his point was thoughtful. And it's something we've talked about on this podcast is that, capitalism isn't the evil. Capitalism, as you and I both know, allows people to ascend. It allows for upward mobility, but it's been bastardized, which is something I've been saying for a long time. And so it's not a true form of itself. And that's sort of what he's saying as well. He's saying that capitalism is good. It allows you to grow the pie. It allows the entire pie to get bigger. But then he's saying certain people get much bigger slices, if not the entire pie, the lower end of society doesn't, right? And that's the wealth inequality. And he's just basically giving a warning, saying you got to start fixing these things now. And that's easy to say, right? And that's sort of what we talk about in these podcasts. And so, well, that's it. That's what the article was about in an interview he gave this week that had a lot of folks talking.
Our monetary system and the way that we approach capitalism is a lot to me like the way that criminal justice in this country, at the very least, is approached, right? Nobody not nobody. Some people do want to do away with capitalism. I'm not one of them. I'm a capitalist. In the true sense of the word, I believe that we've tried socialism and communism and we've seen exactly how that ends. We all know how that ends. And so, yes, capitalism in its form right now has completely been bastardized, and we do need to get back to true capitalism. But the analogy there with criminal justice is we all know I know what a town without a law enforcement presence looks like. You don't want that. Yeah, you just don't want that. But we also know, because we're seeing it more and more, what it looks like when the law enforcement presence is as corrupt, if not more corrupt, than the people that you're supposed to be protected from. And, I thought this week was really interesting. Breonna Taylor, who was murdered in her home while sleeping by officers executing a no-knock warrant at midnight, came in there shooting. The family just settled with Louisville, city of Louisville in Kentucky, for $12 million. And there were a lot of other conditions attached to that. And that's all fine and dandy. However, somebody did something wrong is what the payment of $12 million indicates to me. And kind of like the illegal wiretapping and spying rant that I had last week, where somebody did something wrong, who's getting in trouble for it? Nobody. Right. Well, then, what are we doing here, right? It's Bizarro World. The same with this. If the city is willing to pay out a $12 million settlement, that means somebody did something wrong. So my question again is, who's going to be held accountable? Because the only people being held accountable right now are the citizens, the taxpayers that are writing the check. Let's be clear. This isn't the police union that writes these checks. It doesn't come out of the police department budget. It should. It absolutely should. And it upsets me to no end to know that a private citizen was in a private home, was murdered by law enforcement officials. And as a result of that, the only outcome we have thus far that even approaches some sort of justice is a check cut by taxpayers like Breonna Taylor's family. 0 indictments, 0 accountability so far. And again, it just feels rigged. It just feels rigged. The same way that people know the economy feels rigged. People working 3 jobs to afford childcare, which costs as much as college, which is already too expensive. And it's just a never-ending circle jerk of despair for a lot of people. That's how the criminal justice system feels to me right now. And I know you wanted to talk about the unwanted procedures that are happening in the U.S., and I'm going to let you talk about it, Nick, because I'll probably get myself in trouble if I opine.
No, I honestly this came to my attention yesterday. I know it's a bigger story, and you probably have digested the details and know many more details than I have. So think about it for 1 second and calm down.
I wish I didn't.
And then you can bring everybody up to speed. But first let me talk about the capitalism, because you just talked about the problems as they relate to justice and individuals, but that permeates throughout the whole thing, right? Like from the top down. We don't have to kick the dead horse about how nobody was held accountable for 2008 and the manipulation of LIBOR or any other of the numerous bank scandals, quote unquote scandals, right? Crimes that I could list and have written about and have documented for the better part of a decade now. But when you say the system feels rigged, it's because that's the way it's become. Like, that's what I said. It's a bastardization of itself. And so it has to be reformed. It's not that you have to throw the whole capitalistic U.S. democracy system in the waste bin. It's that you have to reform it by coming to agreements and by deciding what truly has a priority. And so I'm just going to cite like one thing. I've talked on this podcast about how like the external costs of social media companies need to be internalized. It's just one example. And here's another one, the story that I came across today. And it may or may not be a huge story. I don't know, but it speaks to exactly what you're saying. And it's about how, and this has been going on in Canada for a while, but now it's starting to happen in the US, where these companies are abandoning their fracking wells, their natural gas wells, because it's more expensive to clean them up than it is to declare bankruptcy and not clean them, right? To leave it on the hook for the taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And so that's how they've exploited this system, right? Because they got some lobbyists to get on in some congressman or senator's ear that was on the energy committee that wrote some legislation that made it easier, or some financial committee, right, that made it so that the incentives, the mechanisms were deviated from what they really should be and put in favor of corporations instead of the people. Does that sound familiar, right? All the way down through from corporations or people. And so these things, these examples that I was just citing, the externalized cost of social media, the gas wells, et cetera, at some point, and this is the if from 10 minutes ago, if we do the right thing, we come together as a nation and we agree that, hey, wait a minute, like, gas companies leaving unattended wells that are spilling tons and tons and tons of methane into the atmosphere, and that's not a political issue. Methane in the atmosphere is not good. Should probably be made to account for these costs or bear the costs themselves. And the system shouldn't be set up so they can walk away from them and have a financial incentive to do so while putting the cost of cleanup on the taxpayer. And I think that's a pretty easy one, right? Like, I think most people would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so hopefully we get to a point where we can do that outside of a two-person committee on a podcast.
Privatize the profits, socialize all the other stuff, right? All the stuff they don't want. And that's how they get a bigger piece of the pie, right? That's exactly what Ray Dalio is saying. They put everybody else gets the crumbs, and this is nothing new. It's just the new cycle of it, right, Gerardo? It's just coming to a head again. They're tired of the crumbs and everybody else having the pie. And the shamelessness. I saw airlines go to the White House this week and not beg for a loan, but demand grants in the tens of billions of dollars. The same airlines that would charge me $250 to even, change a flight or a day or a time, no matter how much of a heads up you gave them, they don't want a loan. They want grants, Nick. They think they're entitled to grants. It's insane out there right now, guys. It is just crazy. It is just crazy.
They want them in all 50s? Let me get them grants.
It's nasty out there, Nick. It's nasty.
To be clear, you don't have to pay back grants. I think everyone knows.
Yes. To be clear, this is why it's nasty. They aren't even asking for loans anymore. At least the banks in 2008, had the half decency to pay the money back, right? We pumped up the financial system again. They bought back a bunch of stock, and they figured out a way to game it and actually made some money, right? But at least they paid it back.
Why can't they just take out some loans and pay themselves dividends?
Yeah, man, it's a crazy time out there. All we can do here is rant and rave about it a little bit, and hopefully point you to a couple of ways where you can make a little money during the madness, and hopefully it helps provide a little bit of an outlet for just the madness that's going on out there. You want to talk about the hysterectomies a bit?
No, go, and I'll chime in because I honestly am.
Now, I'm going to be quick because I will get myself in trouble because of how I feel about this. It's why I don't talk about the kids in cages at the border often, because of where it takes.
And to be clear, this wasn't like it took me a day to find this news, and I'm a news junkie, so this one was like not picked up, and no one wanted to talk about it.
Correct. So for those not informed, a nurse at one of the ICE detention centers, the immigration arm of America, is claiming that federal immigration detainees underwent unnecessary, unwanted, non-consensual surgeries, including full hysterectomies. For the guys out there that may not be informed, that's when they take out your fucking uterus.
Uterus, yep.
So you can't have kids. And we have a nasty history of this in this country. There's 170 Democratic members of Congress which sent a letter to the Homeland Security Inspector General urging the office to open an immediate investigation. Again, these aren't allegations just coming from the people inside the facilities. For the cynics of you that will say they came to the country illegally, this, and that. No woman deserves to wake up and have their uterus missing because they wanted a better opportunity for themselves and their family. Again, this is taxpayer funded violations of human rights. We are paying these motherfuckers, if true, to perform unwanted procedures on women at detention facilities. It's the same thing we're doing with the kids at the border, where we're privatizing all these contracts and the corporations are making billions off of it while kids sit in cages. And, I'll put a link up. I don't want to get too far into this. I wish full reciprocity on anybody involved with this nastiness. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well,
anybody that has enabled it.
Yeah, the hospital didn't want to comment. The hospital was already under investigation or involved in a lawsuit for perhaps fraudulent Medicare billing. Many women, as you say, complained about treatment and roughness from the doctor, and that's not the least of it. The thing here is, having your reproductive organs removed without your knowledge and against your will, which is, the antithesis and, to not use a big word, the fucking opposite of what America is about, right? And especially from a libertarian point of view, because the most succinct way I can put libertarianism is like pro-choice everything, right? And so woman's body is woman's body, right? It doesn't matter why she's here or what you think her reproductive ability should be. Like, this is America. You don't do that to other people. And if, you can't see that, again, I have trouble expressing, if you can't see that, I don't know what's wrong with you. But it doesn't take a big leap of logic to jump to Nazis, right? If you're talking about performing
exactly the history, yes.
medical procedures on people against their will. And then, I'm going to go immediately to this patriotic education that we're talking about this week, because that's also Nazi fucking bullshit, right?
The National Commission to Promote Patriotic Education. It's I thought it was an Onion article, Nick.
Oh my God, right? And so how is that not a propaganda arm, right? To say, you need to be cheering on America while we're removing women's uteruses against their will. It just smacked me in the face the wrong way, for sure.
The last thing I'll say is the ICE detention facilities are already under investigation for male guards raping many of the detainees. If these women are being raped and then are being outsourced to an off-site doctor and having their reproductive organs removed again, I just wish equal reciprocity to everyone involved. Nothing less, nothing more. If you've done nothing wrong, nothing should happen to you. If you've enabled and participated in this, I just wish you equal reciprocity. Those are the laws of the universe. That's not me. And I'll leave it at that.
It's insane.
It's insane. Let's talk about the Michael Rawling murder. Do you want to get into that? I know we talked about it a week or two ago. We talked about how there was a GoFundMe set up. For those not familiar, this is the gentleman that admitted to killing a far right-wing, protester and fled to Washington from Portland and was subsequently killed in what police described as a shootout. I tend to pay attention to a lot of things at one time and rant and rave, but I also tend to pay attention to those things for more than a minute. And so it's interesting to me that weeks later, when people are saying, well, you did say that the officers, that he fired at you. And that you found a weapon that, allegedly they found a handgun near him and an AR-15 style rifle in his car. Mind you, he wasn't in his car when he was killed. He was outside. Beyond the point. The trouble that I'm having right now is when asked to produce the body cam footage showing what happened, all 8 officers on the scene magically had them off.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's incredible.
That shouldn't even be legal. So you should be required to have them on. We've had this discussion before. You need to be required to have them on. And there needs to be penalization if you're caught in an incident where the footage is needed and it's not provided.
This is where ending qualified immunity, and again, the only people on either side that are really talking about this are libertarians, right? The Democrats aren't talking about it either. Let's be clear on this front, on qualified immunity and all. Joe Biden's not for that either. Let's be absolutely clear. And so, again, we cannot continue to privatize the good stuff and the contracts and all of that. And then, when it comes to like paying out these huge settlements and all the nasty things that people are doing, it's the citizens that are paying for it. It's like we're literally enabling with our tax dollars the police brutality we're protesting against. It's a nutty year. And again, it's just the oddest thing because, again, professionally, we're in a great space and excited about all the different things we have going on, and I'm healthy and in a fortunate situation. But man, I look at so much of this and it's incredible to me that the protesting and the rioting has been 93% peaceful, the way that, the study that I referenced and put a link up to a few weeks ago cited. It's incredible to me that 93% of the people out there have said, the way to achieve, and I don't disagree with them. I'm not calling for, I do think the violence and everything else takes away from the message. I applaud them, but it is interesting to me just how much people really are looking for equality and peace, and how little that's actually, covered in the media on all sides of it. Right. I get it. Doesn't get clicks and ratings and all of that stuff as much as burning down the police department does. But it's crazy times out there, y'all.
And you're going to start to see it. I know we're at the end of our time, but we're getting
for the podcast, hopefully.
Yeah. Elections,
not in general,
month by month, and we're seeing some incumbents, losing or being challenged, and the polls showing that they're in danger of losing, and including maybe Lindsey Graham in South Carolina. And Susan Collins from Maine is actually behind in her poll against the challengers. So it's not going to play out instantaneously, and you probably got a half decade still of crazy shit like this. But some of it is absolutely mind-boggling, and you feel bad that you can't do more about it, especially when you think how it should go. It's like knowing where a stock should be valued or whatever, and the market not seeing it, right? But hopefully it catches up.
Absolutely. Nick, we have to talk about the potential. And again, 2020 being what 2020 is, it takes 48 minutes.
Still haven't done it.
Yeah, you still haven't done it. For maybe life on Venus. It's on Monday, a team of scientists announced, this past Monday, obviously, that they had detected a gas in the hot atmosphere of Venus, and that gas is thought to be a byproduct of life. And so, doesn't mean there's life there, but it doesn't mean there's not. And it means, it's kind of like a mineralized system, right? It doesn't mean you have a gold deposit there, but you likely have some gold somewhere, even if it's anomalous. And I just thought it was really interesting. And so, the article I read, and I'll link to it, said the gas, it's one of two things, right? The gas was either created by life or by some chemical interaction that scientists don't yet know about. So it's one of two. Either way, it's a discovery of some sort that is, at the very least, incredibly interesting to me.
Learning more and more about space. Like you say, comes at the end of the podcast, doesn't get a lot of headline play. And that's after we learned we have UFOs, which also didn't get a lot of play earlier in the year. So there you go.
UFOs and life on Venus. And it's like, man. Crazy year, everybody. Nick, what do we have to look forward to in the resource space in the coming week or weeks that you're excited about? I, of course, am excited about Kinsley Mountain. I think that now will be a middle of October story, because they had 10 holes ready. Because of the fires, one of the roads that was necessary to get the core to the lab was affected. And so I now believe that 13 holes will go to the lab in the coming week. And of course, the turnaround time is expected to be 3 weeks or so. So I would say, I think by mid-October, we at the very least have the first initial set of holes. And meanwhile, 3 rigs keep turning out there. So that for me is a huge, huge, huge one. Personally and professionally, I'm looking forward to seeing what that delivers.
Yeah, and I guess one we haven't mentioned would be Revival Gold, which is added a 3rd rig and doubled the size of their program. And a lot of people are starting to realize what Idaho has to offer. So I'm looking forward to results from that drill campaign for sure.
I like it. That's all I got. Mr. Hodge, anything else?
No, that's it.
I like it. Everybody have a great week. Be kind to each other. Disagree civilly. Make your country better. Make your community better. Help each other out, man. It doesn't take a lot. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This has been episode 87. 87, Nick, of Bizarro World. Mr. Hodge, say goodbye to everybody.
See ya.